back, Minister. Back in 1649, when Oliver J. Cromwell was defending the Rump Parliament, which he was associated with in London, he came to Ireland, him and his generals, his troops, and basically in 1649, when he came to Ireland, and he came to County Clare, one of his generals famously quoted the Burn as saying, "There isn't a tree to hang a man, there isn't enough water to drown a man, and there isn't enough soil to bury a man. So effectively, let's just get out of here." The reason I'm putting this commencement down today is because of the fact that there barely is enough soil to bury a man. The fact is that it is a limestone county. It spreads from Ballyvaughan right down around Doolin, the Cliffs of Moher, right down to parts of East Clare and West Clare. There's a very solid limestone base, which can often, I suppose, become Moher Flag and become other very, very tough, strong rock. And as such, it's very, very difficult for undertakers and grave diggers to dig down. Now, it's my belief, and I'm sure the Minister would agree with me, that the 1888 Act that governs graves and the digging of graves and what's required, which was also amended, I believe, in 1929, probably 80, 90 years ago, that now does merit re-examination. The fact that the 8-foot requirement is there is causing a lot of distress to people, undertakers in County Clare, particularly families, when they're digging out a new plot to interment a loved one, and after about 5 foot they come on concrete that literally needs specialised machinery in order to plough through to get down to the necessary 8 foot that's required. Now, my understanding isn't clear that there are bylaws being considered. This issue is causing a lot of distress. All of the undertakers unanimously in County Clare have made representations, and very strong representations, very moving and very powerful representations, that this issue needs to be addressed. Clare County Council can only do so much with their bylaws, because, as the Minister will well know, bylaws are governed by national legislation, and the scope is limited. So I believe that this is an issue that does need to be addressed. I think if the Minister was to just give a commitment that the government would look at amending the legislation to loosen up the 8-foot rule. Obviously, where 8 foot can be achieved, that is a desirable outcome. But where 8 foot cannot be achieved, well, I think then there needs to be significant flexibility to facilitate the burial of loved ones in the graveyards in their communities, the graveyards where their loved ones have been buried, and where they want to be buried. The Minister, coming from a community background, will understand the importance of and how close and important to people their burial grounds are. So I leave it at that, and I look forward to the Minister's reply.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and I would like to thank the Senator for raising this very sensitive issue. And I do know that, coming from a rural background, there are traditions around burial grounds that sometimes, we can sometimes fall foul a little bit of rules and regulations, but it's terrible if a family meets this when they're in a time of distress. So it would be prudent to certainly look at the matter and see where it is causing difficulties. As the Senator has pointed out himself, the primary legislation dealing with the management and regulation of burial grounds by local authorities is the Public Health Ireland Act 1878, as amended by Local Government Sanitary Services Act in 1948. and more recently the Local Government Act 1994. Legislative provision is also made in the Rules and Regulations for the Regulation of Burial Grounds 1888 as amended. While the primary legislation provides the broad legal framework for burial grounds, more specific matters relating to the management of burial grounds, including the depth of burial plots, are provided for in burial ground regulations. These regulations require that each grave, when opened for the first interment, must be sunk generally to a depth of at least 8 feet. That indeed the Senator has referred to himself. This depth is considered necessary to protect public health, while also allowing for more than one interment in a particular burial plot. In certain circumstances, however, for example, where the nature of the ground does not permit a plot to be sunk to the minimum depth, it may be sunk to a lesser depth. This is a matter for consideration of the local authority in consultation with the Health Service Executive, which must certify that the depth is sufficient for the protection of public health. More than one interment in such plots is prohibited. Concern has been raised in some areas recently regarding the depth of burial plots, notwithstanding that the relevant regulations have been in effect for more than 100 years. In particular, concerns have been raised on health and safety grounds, with suggestions that regulations are inconsistent with more recent health and safety legislation. In the first instance, all workplaces are subject to safety, health and welfare at work legislation. This includes local authority graveyards. Secondly, it is possible to comply with both the burial ground regulations and the relevant health and safety legislation. In this regard, the Health and Safety Authority, in conjunction with local authorities, has developed a safe system of work plan for employers and employees working in graveyards. While the application of the system is a matter for each local authority, it can be applied through local authorities' own health and safety procedures and policies. For example, Cork County Council has issued a policy in relation to occupational safety, health and welfare in respect of works in local authority-owned graveyards. It covers, among other things, the excavation of graves. It provides that graves must be machine excavated in all save exceptional circumstances, but also sets out procedures for situations where, for example, in older rural graveyards, excavation by machine is not possible. Accordingly, it is not considered necessary to amend the existing burial ground regulations. In the first instance, local authorities have sufficient scope to apply the regulations practically to deal with atypical circumstances as they arise. It is possible to implement the regulations in a manner consistent with health and safety legislation. Thank you,
Thank you, Minister.
Just quick supplementary, Cathaoirleach. I suppose if the HSE, or is there a procedure in place where the HSE can certify that the full graveyard, it's not possible to achieve the 8 foot, or does it have to be done individually? And like I suppose the other thing is Clare County Council at the moment are about to implement bylaws. Would it be fair to say that they have broad discretionary scope in terms of those bylaws, including in relation to the 8 foot depth of grave issue?
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. I would have to check if they have a broad scope, Senator, but we will come back to you about that. Perhaps as way of maybe practicality, that we might allow and see what happens when the bylaws are introduced, and see if the same situations still persist. So what I would give, the commitment that I would give to you is allow the bylaws to be brought in. Let's see what happens after that, and I will definitely, I'll give you a commitment to certainly relook at this again if that is satisfactory to the Senator.
Yeah, thank you very much.